Hey everybody, Casey here with Life Abstract Gaming, and this week I've been wondering what would be the best possible, most consumer-friendly decisions game companies can make. What would amount to a gamer's paradise? A couple of weeks back, I did a video detailing Sony's ongoing refusal to allow for crossplay between its console and other systems, specifically Xbox One and the Nintendo Switch. I won't rehash those details here, so if you want them, please go check that video out if you haven't. But recently, Sony relented in a hilariously sterile post on their PlayStation blog on September 26th. Following a comprehensive evaluation process, SIE has identified a path towards supporting cross-platform features for select third-party content. We recognize that PS4 players have been eagerly awaiting an update, and we appreciate the community's continued patience as we have navigated through this issue to find a solution. We have completed a thorough analysis of the business mechanic required to ensure that the PlayStation experience for our users remain intact today and in the future as we look to open up our platform. So with Sony being the last of the three big console makers to start allowing crossplay, this marks the realization of one of many fantasies gamers have held for an idealistic version of the medium. Clearly we're just at the beginning of this new frontier, but it got me thinking, what other things about the gaming landscape today would we want to see change to better suit consumers? To that effect, I've come up with a couple of ideas that I think any true gamer would love to see. I'll admit that some of these ideas are much more geared toward the players and not so much the developers or publishers who still need to make money, but I do feel at least some of these ideas would work for everyone. True universal crossplay. We just talked a little bit about being on the doorstep of this feature, but as it exists today, it's still a very segmented ecosystem that only works for some titles and not others. What gamers and developers would really appreciate is every multiplayer game sharing a singular pool of online players from any platform. There are some multiplayer games that die on the vine due to low server numbers across the different platforms they exist on. I'm sure in a couple of those cases, if those 3 or 4 different tiny communities could have all existed as one medium or large community, the games attached to them could have seen more longevity and spawned either continued improvements or an entire sequel with many improvements rather than complete shutdown. This is still sort of a pipe dream since there are so many different companies and services involved, but we're closer to something like this being reality now than we've ever been before. But speaking of dreams becoming reality, another idyllic feature is practically here already. I'm talking about, of course, subscription game libraries. Netflix is a household name, but not just because they funded some amazing and memorable content over the years, but because they popularized the subscription instant access model. Being able to log into an app and watch whatever you want in the library has changed the way people consume content, which has changed how a lot of people feel comfortable paying for that content. Why pay $10 today to watch one movie when I paid $10 this month and can binge a bunch of stuff? Naturally, other industries took notice and copied, but none make more sense than the video game industry. You can now subscribe to services like Xbox Game Pass, EA Access, or PlayStation Now, which all let you pay a monthly subscription to get full access to a library of games. You just download what you want onto your hard drive and play for as long as you're a subscriber. Depending on how much you play, you can get tremendous value out of a system like this, but it's not perfect yet. In an ideal gamer future, these libraries wouldn't be segmented by publisher. They'd instead contain any and all game releases. Of course, the monthly price would likely need to be raised higher than the $10 or so being charged, but every subscriber would have every game, period. And if you really don't play games that much to get the full value of this subscription, you'd still have the option to purchase full price versions of the game, either physically or digitally, whether you were subscribed or not. But for something like this to truly be realized, there's an industry practice that needs to be dealt with first. We would need to see the death of exclusives. Exclusive games are titles that are only available on a single platform. Usually these are games whose IP is owned by the makers of that platform, like Zelda for Nintendo, the Halo series for Microsoft, or God of War for Sony. But third-party studios can sometimes also sign exclusivity deals as well, like Insomniac Games who did Sunset Overdrive for Microsoft, then Marvel Spider-Man for Sony. Exclusive games exist for the sole purpose of selling the consoles they are exclusive to. So if you love Super Mario, you have to get a Nintendo system to play any future releases in the series. But what if I also love Gears of War? Or The Last of Us? You're forced to buy 3 or more gaming systems if you want to experience the full range of games you're interested in, which isn't cheap and takes up a lot of in-home space and energy. But even when you own all the systems, console makers have thought of ways to still push you towards playing on their system with timed exclusivity that puts a delay on when a third-party game or content can go to other systems. Like in the case of Tomb Raider, Sony players had to wait an entire year before they could see the game on their system. And Destiny, which I personally feel is the worst example of this, holds actual content back from the Xbox version of the game for sometimes over a year, though everyone pays the exact same price. Even though I have a PlayStation 4, I like playing shooters on the Xbox One, and so do my friends who also play online with me. If I picked up the PS4 version of Destiny for the extra content, I'd have that, but I wouldn't have any of my friends to play with. So it's essentially a lose-lose scenario for me, the consumer. I think gamers would really love to see a stop to any and all exclusive content. A lot of gamers pick a console at the start of a generation and can only justify having a single system in their house, so they either deny any interest in games they can't play on other systems, or come to regret ever making their decision in the first place, which is something you don't really want to see a consumer do, because it can push them to forego buying into a new generation early on, or at all in the future. Getting rid of exclusivity is something that can have a positive effect on the titles as well, since they tend to sell less than multi-platform games, due to the simple fact that there's a smaller market of potential customers. Can you imagine just how much more Super Mario Odyssey would have sold if it existed on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One? Sure, Nintendo would have taken a hit in sales on the game on its own system, the Switch, but that leads into the next idea: the single console future. This is something that's been thrown around for decades. Why have multiple different consoles at all? In all honesty, there's no real reason other than companies seeking to monopolize the industry. Unlike movies, the video game medium has been able to survive having multiple formats for home distribution. Remember Betamax? If not, that's because VHS won as the more popular video format and was adopted worldwide. In comparison, multiple console generations have existed where discs and cartridges were used at the same time. Even today, Nintendo uses a cartridge while everyone else has adopted Blu-ray, and they're still thriving. But just because they can survive this way doesn't mean that they should. The benefit of dominant formats for consumers means you can purchase a standardized device to play that format, like a Blu-ray player. So film studios will release their content on that format, and it is guaranteed to work on a device in your home. In the gaming industry, console makers build their own devices, and the publishers and developers, who are like the studios, have to weigh the cost and benefit of releasing games on one or more consoles. Consumers then either need to buy multiple consoles or miss out on some games, as I detailed earlier. A single standard console could solve everything about this mess. Companies could still make their own branded versions with specific features or preferred controllers, but the consoles would all be capable of playing the same games as one another the same way. In this case though, companies like Nintendo may run the risk of being creatively stifled, as they've been known to develop hardware that serves the purpose of helping them realize gameplay ideas. So some sort of collaboration between all the console makers would need to happen to settle on a final product, and I personally don't ever see that happening. What's far more likely, however, is a streaming service that would supersede the need for a single physical console, and instead act as a single virtual console that could be updated and improved upon via whatever hardware the makers needed, and the game content would just be streamed to players. Streaming gameplay is not a new idea. It's been around for a very long time, but services like OnLive and the first iteration of PlayStation Now suffer due to unreliability. It's a side effect of our still growing high-speed internet infrastructure, but tech companies have yet to give up on the idea. Google just recently announced its beta test for streaming video games right from the Chrome browser, and Microsoft is testing a similar service called xCloud to use on consoles, PCs, and phones. Being able to play any game you want without the need for expensive hardware that locks you into an ecosystem is a plus for consumers, and with the hardware being standardized yet unrestricted, developers can familiarize themselves with it and get the most out of the hardware. Some of these ideas are much closer to reality than others, but they all share the goal of improving the way the players interact with games or the way games are able to be distributed to players. Imagine being able to pick up your preferred controller, turn on your favorite games, and just play with your friends from the comfort of anywhere you want. I don't know about you, but that definitely sounds like a gamer's paradise to me. So, do you agree with any of my thoughts on what an ideal future for gamers looks like? Do you have any ideas that I haven't thought of? Let us know. We're listening.